The New Orleans Saints, under no circumstances, should not trade up to draft Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders. Well, unless one very specific scenario unfolds in the first round. Tell you all about it. I'm Tim. Let's talk Saints. Now, before we kind of roll into why I do not want to trade up unless one very specific thing happens, kind of need to put a few things in context. One of them is the quarterback class, the prospects, the consensus. And I'm not saying this is 100% agreement among everyone, but the consensus is more or less Cam Ward's the top guy, clearly. Shedeur Sanders is clearly number 2. Jackson Dart, likely the number 3. Not sure. Is he a first rounder? Is he not a first rounder? I had a video on him recently. I'll pop it up here somewhere in the top so you can click on it. I can't disagree with that in the sense I think all 3 of them kind of resemble what the modern NFL quarterback is starting to become. The running game is much more prevalent than it has been, and it keeps becoming more important every year. And as it kind of goes up, that insane passing attack that we were seeing for most of the 20 teens is kind of coming back down to here. And you think the modern NFL quarterback, we're seeing more and more mobile guys, preferably even actual dual threats, so they can do a lot of the running load themselves and put a lot of pressure on defenses with their running game. Efficient and accurate passers. And I think all 3 of those guys kind of fit in there. They kind of have the build and the mold they're looking for, that 6'2", 225-ish range. I think Sanders is a little lighter, but it's the modern NFL. A good strength and conditioning coach probably put that 10, 15 pounds on him without losing a whole lot. So I get all that. The one thing I don't see really mentioned about him, and I think this is important, is nobody's like kind of throwing that elite, can't miss, gotta have tag on them in the same way they were doing, say, last year to Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Drake May, and even Penix and Nix prior to the draft started getting a lot of momentum, and McCarthy, and they were kind of talking about him like that. So you may see it the closer we get to the draft, but right now you're really not. So with that context, it's really, really hard for me to sit there and look at 9 and go, it's going to cost you to get really 1 or 2. I don't think you can, even if you trade with the Giants at 3, guarantee that trade up is going to get you one of those 2 guys. In fact, it would make the most sense that they are drafted 1 and 2. And if we were sitting up there, we'd be having a totally different conversation than we're having now on this. My real issue with the trade up is the Saints' recent history since 2018 with trade ups. And I know y'all all know what the big one was in 2018. It was a different set of circumstances back then. 2017 draft had hit. Our roster was in really good shape. We were looking to tweak it and make it better. We gave up essentially 3 picks, technically 2 extras because we swapped first with Green Bay, moving from 27 to 14. But the problem is you may have reached, I don't think you may, the history has told us, you reached quite a bit on Davenport. You gave up an awful lot to get him. And then when he missed, as the roster started declining, 2019, 2020, you didn't have that 2019 first-round pick. You had given up a couple of other assets to help mitigate as you were losing guys getting older. They were walking out in free agency. More on that in a second. But you didn't have that availability, and you're kind of starting to scramble to keep the roster intact. It's only gotten progressively worse. Part of the reason was you had a 3rd-round pick in 2017 who actually you developed into a legitimate pass rusher, but you let him walk out because – and I really think it's because you gave up so much to get Davenport. They were unwilling to move off their vision of what he could be, even though, hey, the guy that you drafted the year before became what you were envisioning, and he was sitting on your roster. That made the problem even worse. 2022 is interesting because, in my opinion, and some people probably look at this a little differently, I think you actually had 2 trade-ups. Now, the first one wasn't in the draft. This is the one I think some people would probably disagree with, and I'm okay with it. But in my mind, when you made the trade with Philly pre-draft a couple weeks before, where you gave up your first rounder, 18 in 2022, you gave up your first in 2023, your second in 2024, third and 7 in 2022 to get 16 and 19. And I think you got a 6th rounder in 2022. Thing about the 2022 draft is pretty much that was a probably historically weak year in the draft. And so giving up back end picks and swapping those around probably didn't matter at all. I really haven't gone back and looked to see what was back there, what the Saints did. But I think the key to this was you were trying to make 2 impact moves. The one we all know that didn't work out was you took Trevor Penning with 19. And again, a lot like Davenport, and this was really at the time when they made that pick, there was a lot of people saying, look, we knew you were high on him. He's a bit of a reach and a project. Probably do what Mickey Loomis never does, maybe even traded down from 19 and still got him anyway if you were that much in love with him. But hey, you were in love with him, so you did it. And then you compounded the problem of it being a reach as you did nothing in the start of his career to, I don't know, actually develop him from project to legit NFL starting lineman. We had a really good coaching staff on the offensive line come in last year and start fixing that, but still. I don't know if you could put the good tag on him, but at least we got him to not suck anymore. I would say he was probably an average to above average overall right tackle. You finally got something out of him. And it's the same thing. You start giving up picks. That 2023 first rounder, we all know what that turned into, was Jalen Carter. Boy, there's a problem fixer right there. But you made a mistake, you overpaid. Now, the second one is, and this was a sneaky one, I totally forgot about it till I started doing research on this, was the fact that you didn't draft Olave at 16. I forgot about that. You drafted him at 11. And all you did give up there is you gave up a 3rd in 2023. Not devastating amount to move up 5 spots. For a guy everybody kind of thought had a chance to be a top NFL 1 breakout type guy. He is not that. He's come close. He just, for one reason or another over the last 3 years, every time you think he's like right there, it just doesn't happen for him. It doesn't mean it can't happen for him, but I mean, honestly, he's starting to kind of run out of time for that. But it's still on the table. And for a 3rd in the following year, it's not horrible. But it would be better if we could get him to that next level that we were expecting. But even then, he's still a solid 1, if not a really good number 2 NFL receiver in a draft that, like I said, historically wasn't that good overall in talent. Maybe not a bad move, but it's the fact it's that 3rd round in 2023 that makes it iffy. If it was a 3rd in 2022, you probably wouldn't even be sweating it. So I wouldn't say it was horrible. It could have been better, and it could still be better. But even then, the one last year, we made a great one, I think, in the 2nd round in 2024 when we packaged up some of our day 3 picks, which we had an awful lot of, to move up 4 spots to grab Kool-Aid McKinstry. And Philly had moved up also and got right in front of us at the same time this was going on. They grabbed Cooper DeJean, he of the pick 6 in the Super Bowl. But he played really well in the back end in the latter part of the season, the playoffs for Philly. I think McKinstry played well for us. Both of those guys were looked at as possible 1st rounders, but definitely high 2nd rounders. We made a good trade to move up and get one. And so point of all this is Mickey proves it's in his ability to make good trade ups. But when he makes the big splash ones, and I really put that Penning and Davenport in that category, it has crushed us. And I say all that to reinforce that's the kind of trade you're going to be looking for to get up 1 or 2 to make sure you get one of these 2 quarterbacks if you really want to trade up to get them. The fact that quarterback is the most important position on the field is normally the argument of why you would do that. And I get it. And I can't disagree with that, especially as I said in the Dart video. If our supposed guru, head coach, and offensive coordinator, quarterback guys are really pounding the table to do it, you may have to take them fairly seriously. But you got to understand that what you give up to get up there, it's going to be hard to bring in those younger, good players you're going to need to start replacing the veteran players you have declining on your roster that you're eventually going to phase out. So it is a total catch-22, and it's a dangerous one. And I'm just not 100% sure that's one you will get your return on. So that's the only reason why. And like I said, if we were already up there and they were having this talk, Brick, go for it. I wouldn't even sweat me, wouldn't even phase me, because I know we have all these other picks that we can start trying to fill the holes in our roster or getting some younger guys in and ready to replace veterans as they start moving out. And with all the picks we have on day 2, I think that might be the day 2 plan, and I don't have a problem with that either. But you're going to lose all those to try to trade up, plus whatever you're going to have to give up next year. That's a dangerous game. Now, I promised you a scenario where I would be okay with it. And this doesn't necessarily go for quarterbacks. It goes for some of the other top players who are sitting up there. But sticking with the quarterback example, if one, or really this works out at both of them, would somehow not be taken in those top 3 picks, one that would scare me a little bit going, what do those teams know? But I could also see a world where they're like, we're going to roll when we got a quarterback, try to fix other problems, and wait to possibly a better quarterback class, what it looks like maybe in 2026. I don't think the fan base would be real happy about it, but I get why they would be thinking that. But in that scenario happens, now all of a sudden, there's not a lot of teams other than Pittsburgh who might really want to make a big jump up and grab somebody. But just to be safe, you may at that point want to go, look, if it doesn't cost much, if it costs us that 1 third-round pick, something along those lines, and that's basically what Philly gave Chicago to move up when they had our 10th spot in 2023 to take Jalen Carter. Took 1 day 2 pick to do it. You get in that scenario, absolutely. Makes all the sense in the world. And even then, if you have to give up a little more, you walk that line of going, yeah, I think there's a margin where you can ride that line and go, we're not giving too much up to move up a couple spots to take one of these guys if we really love them. But I just don't think you can do multiple first-round picks or a ton of picks in this draft, especially on day 2, or some mid-round picks next year and jam them all up, sort of like we had to do in those 2 bigger trades going, man, it's almost like you do that even if you get these quarterbacks, even if they work out and as good as people are expecting them to be drafted in that spot, you're going to hand them such a crappy roster. Realistically, are you giving them a chance to succeed? Because if you aren't, then the next question you have to ask yourself, are they good enough, i.e. Patrick Mahomes, i.e. Josh Allen? Are they that type of guy that's going to give me, screw it, you gave me a crappy offensive line and not a bunch of good receivers, but we're going to make it work? I don't know. And that's even a bigger gamble and a much tougher road to walk down. So there's always the possibility something changes, and likely will, between now and the draft. But this conversation has been sprouting up everywhere, and I think it stems a lot from showing up at Miami's Pro Day and showing a lot of interest in Cam Ward. Yeah, absolutely. Who wouldn't check that box? Because even though the consensus is telling you, yeah, he may not be, let's say, Jay Daniels or Drake May in this draft, you roll in with your guys and take an interest and go, you know what? We see it. He is. And then you back to that conversation. What are we willing to give up to move up there? And if he is that guy, can we put enough around him 26, 27 by losing these draft picks where we don't put him in a scenario where we traded up, grabbed him, but we're guaranteeing him to fail because we cannot fill a roster around him with enough good talent? Let me know what you think down in the comments about the possibility of trading up for either one of those quarterbacks, because I really wanted to do this video earlier, but I have been going back and forth on it. And I think I'm not 100% convinced in my position, but it's probably somewhere in the 90s, because part of me is realizing that I think the Derek Carr breakup after this year, or possibly by the end of this year, depending on how the season goes, think of what happened in Las Vegas and how we wound up here in the first place, could be more and more of a possibility. Do we want to wait and see what happens in 2026? Because that quarterback draft class on paper may be better than this one overall. I don't know. And again, Moore, Nussmeier, it's two guys that, by all accounts, if they're really, really lobbying hard for one of these guys, I do believe you got to listen to them. It just comes down to what it's going to cost you. What I didn't say earlier that I should mention, that is, if you're sitting at 9, and this is again kind of mentioned in the Jackson Dart video, but obviously if Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders is there, then you really, really have to think hard and go again with the, it seems like, pending Derek Carr separation incoming going. I think at that point you may have to pull the trigger. And I'm even more a little bullish that if Jackson Dart is their guy, you do have to consider him at 9, maybe a little more than I thought about a week ago. So just to clarify that. One other thing bring up before I sign off, been seeing in the comments a lot about, hey, when you're going to go live again, when you're going to go live again, just kind of catch you up what's going on this weekend. Like tomorrow, the streaming service software that I use now is going away for reasons. The new one I've been working on trying to figure out for the last 2 weeks. I think I have it down enough to kind of do some videos. So you're going to see a little different look once that happens. Still struggling with how to get the streaming thing to work correctly. So I'm not actually going to live stream on it until I know for a fact you'll be able to see me and hear me, which I'm hoping will be next week, because my plan is we are going to start really getting heavy into the draft talk. I mean, that's all over the place now. That's the next step. We just had some pro days that still going through, and some big ones: Ohio State, Georgia, LSU. We shipped our running back coach halfway across the country to Boise State for obvious reasons. So a lot of that stuff's coming in over the last couple of days. And I think now we can really start kind of looking at that draft board. We can start really looking hard at that number 9 pick, and trading up may take on a different meaning once we kind of figure out what the top 10 basically is going to look like. That's my plan for next week. And I'd really like to get a live stream in there if at all possible, so we can really dive into 9's important. We can't screw it up. There's no doubt about that. So you like joining first time, you like what you saw, please go ahead, subscribe. Everybody make sure you give me a thumbs up. Yes, we know YouTube algorithm loves it, and I want them to love me just as much as y'all love me, right? So should be seeing you on Monday. Hopefully we're going to get that live stream in. We can talk a lot about rookies in draft class next week. That's the plan. Wish me luck this weekend that I can finish figuring out what I need to figure out and make it all happen. So till I see you then, I'm Tim. Peace out, and who dat.